everyone, and welcome back to our monthly series, The Month Gone By in Automotive Industry, where we bring to you the key insights, top highlights, and a comprehensive analysis of the performance of the auto industry from the last month, that's September 2024. I'll begin with our first guest here, Mr. Shamsher Dewan, who's a Senior Vice President and Group Head of Corporate Ratings at ICRA. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Dewan, looking at the passenger vehicle segment, decline in dispatches for the top three OEMs has become like a trend for 3 months in a row now, probably for the entire July to September quarter. We know that the car makers are realigning their wholesales, but I want to understand how you see this. Is this a result of kind of misreading of the market demand by the OEMs where they continue to build up the stocks? Or do we see this as a clear sign of a slowdown in the consumer segment in this market? I also ask this because we have seen continued high discounts on a lot of models in the market during the past months. So please, help us understand this.
Thanks, Shabangi, and good afternoon to everyone. No, I think, when we started this year, this calendar year, at ICRA, we thought, this is the year where there will be some breaks on the overall demand momentum. And our projection for the passenger vehicle domestic market was somewhere about 3 to 5% growth. And, it's been below that so far in the current year. And our primarily factor was that, we were sitting on a high base effect. Last 2 years have been very strong for the passenger vehicle market. And to some extent, the pent-up demand that helped the industry momentum over the last couple of years was kind of, waning out. And, the trends in the second quarter of this fiscal and particularly in the month of September have been in line with, what's been the trend overall. And if you look at the volume data which came in the last couple of days, the top 7 OEMs put together, I think there is about 1 to 2% growth on a YOY basis. This, in my view, largely reflects the fact that there is some amount of recalibration in the production by OEMs in light of the fact that the inventory levels in the system are pretty high at close to about 70 to 75 days. Now, I think all eyes are now set on the festive season. I think that is something which will drive the overall year's performance. Having said this, I think while some OEMs have seen a dip in their production and volumes overall, but some OEMs have continued to grow well, and that's partly, driven by the fact that some of their models have been doing quite well and they have an order book.
We also have our guest, Mr. C.S. Vigneshwar, the newly elected president of FADA. Mr. Vigneshwar, thanks for joining in. Over the past months, dealers have been complaining of high inventory in the channels, and Mr. Shamsher tells us that the inventory is still as high as 70 days right now. Do you think the dealer community is now walking at a good pace because there's also the festive season coming up, or it's still high? What is your take on that?
Well, the good news and the not so good news. The good news is the fact that there is demand in the market. The footfalls are looking strong. Even during the Shraddh month, the last month was a lot of days were inauspicious. Despite that, the footfalls were quite nice, and there were a lot of customer interest in the cars. But however, the bookings are going to probably come during the auspicious time starting off today. The auspicious time is going to last another 45 days, and we're going to look forward to that. Having said that, the pain of high stock is still there. We've been talking about this for the last 4 or 5 months, but the OEMs have assured us that because of strong sales, which is going to come when the festive season is coming in, we will be able to, reduce stock, liquidate stock, and then optimize stock after that. So hopefully that happens.
Next up, we have with us a guest, Mr. Arun Malhotra, who's an industry veteran. And Mr. Malhotra, thanks for joining us, first of all. You have been tracking the industry for many, many years now. And you have heard the current views of Mr. Shamsher and Mr. Vigneshwar. But I want you to sum up the industry for passenger vehicles in the domestic market for the first 6 months now, because we already completed September. The first half of the fiscal is over. So how do you look at the trend for the passenger vehicle industry?
Thanks, Shwati. I think what Vignesh and Shamsher said is very correct. If I look at the industry, the first 6 months, if I take the wholesale, it's about 2.1 million, very exactly half of what was done last year. Now, you would say that the second half could be better, But one thing we must keep in mind in this first 6 months of this financial year, even after taking Wuhan data, adding 6% to it, because there are some states not covered, the industry has 2 lakh stock has been added in the dealer network. And take January to March, which was before the financial year, 70,000 was added there. So effectively from January 1st till September, 2,70,000 stock has been added. So stocks can anyway be there. Now, festival signals are good, but the challenge which I see is today is that the festival season is there for 1 month. And you need a super bumper, a super hit. You don't need a hit. You need a super hit month to get over the problem, which looks unlikely. It'll do well, but effectively, even if the stock goes down to 30 days, generally festival season goes down, it'll be a challenge. And we must remember last year, January to March, or this year, January to March were high dispatch months. It was approximately 3.7 lakhs a month. So I remember Shamsher and we were in the panel together before that, and we said 4 to 5%. And a lot of people did criticize. I'm sticking my neck out, and I would say passenger vehicles will be lucky if we close the year flat in the financial year for wholesale dispatches, because stocks are already there. You can't add beyond the point.
Got it. So a lot is riding on the month of October because all the festivities are also this year in that same month. Unlike last year when the festivities were distributed between October and November. So moving on, looking at the passenger, the two-wheeler segment, it's completely a different ball game altogether as compared to the passenger vehicles, because it's a happy situation in the two-wheelers for customers, dealers, and OEMs, as it looks like, because the demand and the supply are moving in line. So I'll begin with Mr. Vigneshwar. How do you see, the stocks are perfectly in line for the festive season? Do you see any kind of challenge coming up for two-wheelers?
It's so nice to see the two-wheelers do well after a couple of years of glut for them. It's also nice to see that a lot of stocks have been optimized right now. Yes, in certain brands, in certain places in India, there is slightly higher stocking, but this should be taken care because of the festive demand. It's also good to see that the rural India is slowly overtaking urban India in terms of demand for two-wheelers. Then there's also a overall factor wherein higher capacity two-wheelers are slowly taking over the market in terms of market share. I would say that the two-wheelers are moving more premium than what they were. And the rural market is really supporting, the Bharat of India is really supporting how the two-wheeler market is functioning right now. And the demand is quite strong. New vehicles have come in. There are certain brands who introduced CNG bikes, and they've also been having good responses. So, and so is also with EV two-wheelers. So even EV two-wheelers are doing well. So I think the new introductions of products, the new introductions of different alternative fuel means have also brought in a breath of fresh air and breathed life into it.
Yeah, Mr. Devan, I'll come to you now. As you just mentioned about the premiumization trend, we have seen this through the year for two-wheelers. But do you see the festive season could drive up the demand for the commuter segment as well? And if you have to list down three key factors that's, driving the demand for the two-wheelers specifically, what would that be?
I think the narrative for the two-wheeler segment has been somewhat different, and here you have to, recall or remember that from a peak of 20 million units in FY 2019, the industry just crashed to 13 million units in FY 21, the year after, and during the COVID period. And the multiple factors which really impacted or hit the two-wheeler segment. On one side, you had the rising cost of ownership, which was a combination of many factors. The price of two-wheelers went up by almost 35 to 40%. And that's a segment which, caters to, the lower strata of the economy where value purchase is much more significant. And on top of that, you had the impact of pandemic, right? So among all the segments of the auto industry, two-wheelers were the last ones to actually recover. And even last year, which was FY 24, the volumes for the entire industry were still a tad bit lower than what they were in FY 2019, unlike the passenger vehicle market, which were, all-time highs. So I think, we were the last ones to recover. in terms of the two-wheeler. And the factors that are driving growth this year, in our view, one is, of course, the replacement demand, which has come back in the system. And as Mr. Vigneshwar said, I think the rural sentiments are quite positive this year, which is helping the segment. And if this buoyancy continues during the festive season, I think we are heading for a higher numbers for the overall two-wheeler market this year.
Do you see them touching the last peak of FY19 this year?
It could be closer to that, but may not really be there.
All right, all right. A quick check on the growing electric two-wheeler industry. We see how the legacy OEMs are gradually, month over month, increasing their share in this market that was for quite some time led by Ola Electric in terms of volumes. For September, top three companies, that's Ola, Bajaj, and TVS, are competing closely for their share in this growing segment. With this, Mr. Devan, I want to ask you, what are the three key factors that you think are essential to not just take a lead in the country in electric two-wheeler segment, but also sustain it in the long term?
Despite the fact that there has been a reduction in the subsidies or incentive which were offered to the electric two-wheeler segment, the segment has continued to grow. If you look at the average volumes per month in FY23 for the electric two-wheeler segment was close to about 60,000 units a month. That kind of increased to, I think, about 78,000 last year. And if you look at the first 6 months of this year, they're averaging at about 84,000 units. And I'm quoting here the Vahan data, which comes in. And overall, I think there is a growth of 27% in the electric two-wheeler segment in the first 6 months of this year on a YOY basis. I think this is driven by two factors. One is that OEMs have realized that if they have to compete effectively, their products have to be positioned in a way that we have to be in a situation where subsidies will no longer be there. So effectively, you're seeing that they've been introducing products which are in the sub 1 lakh rupees segment, which reduces the gap with the ICE segment, and on a total cost of ownership basis, they are positioned much better. Second, I think, as you rightly said, there's a market share differentiation also reducing. That is being driven by the fact that some of the OEMs have been ramping up their production. They were earlier a little slow to begin with. Maybe they was trying to study the market in terms of adding the dealers, etc. So that, I think, is now gaining momentum.
Right. You touched upon the subsidy part. That was one major policy update for the month. We'll come to that. But before that, I'll come to you, Mr. Malhotra. I just want to ask you, you have seen the industry growing for many, many years, and now that we have this nascent technology emerging in the country, what would you bet on? The legacy two-wheeler makers eventually taking a lead in the EV industry, or the startups which had an early start maintaining a momentum in the long run?
I think it's a good level playing field. Today, you have 4 to 5 players who are at a good volume level, and each of them have their own strengths. And as Shamsher mentioned, they also broad-based their product portfolio. So I think this legacy that one market leader will have a 50% market share is a thing of the past. You will have much closer market shares because both the legacy players and even the startups are doing well. The only challenge I see are two in this thing. Growths are good because acceptance is coming. The ecosystem has developed. The companies have realized they can't rely on subsidy. They're putting their best foot forward. But today, we still don't have offerings in the motorcycle segment. And that contributes 2/3 of the market. So although penetrations may rise, but effectively, in scooters, penetrations may rise dramatically. But if you look at the total two-wheeler, it will still be 6 to 7%. So we need some action on the motorcycle front, which is very much required. That's an important part. And I think it will continue to grow 25 to 30, can grow further even, because people have got used to it. The ecosystem has developed, confidence has inspired, the network has even reached. So 4 to 5 strong players in the market is a good thing. The only challenge is there are 100 players in the market. So the flip side is a lot of players who are selling below 1,000, which is about 90% of the players, they'll fall by the wayside because they won't have a unique proposition to give. But overall, for the industry and for the customer, it's a great opportunity.
Right. And during the month, as I mentioned, one major policy update was the announcement of the PM E-Drive scheme, which clears the air on subsidy availability by the government and subsides the FAME 2 and EMPS scheme for promotion of electric mobility in the country. Mr. Devan, how do you see this, impact of this scheme on acceleration of the demand for EVs, do you think something more could have been included, or it just works out perfectly?
Well, I think the fact that the government has come out with PME Drive continues to demonstrate their renewed focus and thrust on scaling up the EV ecosystem in India. And this coupled with the fact that there are many other policy initiatives that the government has taken over the last few years, especially the PLI policies for auto OEMs, for component manufacturers, for EV cell manufacturing. So I think a lot of these things are work in progress in India, but you will see the results of this over the next 2 to 3 years.
Got it. And as we complete the first half of this fiscal, also give us a sense of the export market during this period, if you
So,
could like.
Shivani, just want to add one point to the entire piece. So, the mobility scheme is working good, and the PLI is part of it. But passenger four-wheelers, in as far as EV is concerned, that's been in a bad shape. And the first 6 months, it's just been flat. And on top of it, we see the last quarter, it's a decline of 7%. And the fleet segment, which is not covered in it, fleet taxi segment, I think it's a major blow. Plus, a lot of states are also withdrawing their benefits of local sales tax exemption. So four-wheelers, in spite of more players, more action, is on a very sticky wicket, unlike two-wheelers.
Right, right. That's right. And as I was saying, Mr. Devan, we are completing the first half of the fiscal. So could you give us a sense of the export market as well?
Right. So I think there has been some bounce back as far as exports are concerned in the current year. As you would know, I think the last couple of years were a bit of a challenge, especially for the two-wheeler segment where we have a good amount of exports. And those were largely driven by the fact that some of the key markets to which India exports, especially in the nearby markets of Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and then some key markets in Africa and Latin America, there were certain geopolitical, inflation, and currency related headwinds. Some of these headwinds are abating gradually, which is helping the market to see some recovery. But I think still early days, I would say, still more ground to cover.
Yeah. And lastly, on the commercial vehicle part, we had seen, for the LCVs and the MHCVs, and both had different factors affecting them. So what can we expect from the Q3 of the fiscal for commercial vehicles?
So typically, you see, sequentially, the second quarter is a weaker quarter for the commercial vehicle segment, primarily because of monsoons. And this time, you also had, the impact of the elections were just getting over. So there were a lot of projects, especially on the infrastructure side, etc., which were on a wait and watch kind of a mode. And hence, the fleet operators were not also coming out and placing their orders. So we do expect, I think the quarter three will be much better compared to quarter two. And I think the impact of this was already visible. If you look at the September volumes, they are month on month better by almost 17-18%, which is in line with our expectation. But having said this, I think CV is one of the segments which is extremely cyclical within the overall auto space. And this is a year where, the cyclical slowdown has already started. I mean, it started somewhere in the second half of last year itself, and that's why you had FY24, which was flat. So this year there is going to be some bit of decline in the overall commercial vehicle sales, primarily led by the medium and heavy commercial vehicle segment, and then into the LCV trucks also. But buses will continue to do well because there is a lot of replacement demand which is coming in from STUs, schools, and colleges, and the electric bus penetration, although at a gradual pace, is also picking up.
Yeah, the numbers for the bus segment has been good through the past months as well. And talking about the outlook for the next few months, probably we'll be specifically starting with October. Mr. Vigneshwar, I'll come to you for this. How do you see, if you have to talk about one headwind and one tailwind, specifically for the passenger vehicle and two-wheeler segment, how do you sum that up?
I don't see a headwind as such at the moment. From the dealership point of view, yes, in passenger vehicles, we are sandbagged by stock, but we did discuss about it and how we plan to get out of that. But in terms of two-wheeler, I think there's a lot of scope to be further improved, and we can really do well. I would also like to touch upon what commercial vehicle is going to do in the next quarter. We need to understand commercial vehicles from the point of view that infra projects are extremely important for it. We've just come off from an election, a long, prolonged protracted elections, which has resulted in the fact that only now a lot of projects are actually being tabled and being signed off. And huge amount of infrastructure projects are being signed off in the lakhs of crores. So therefore, this would be a great opportunity for the commercial vehicle segment to take advantage of. Number one, so many of these projects would be implemented, and a lot of the implementation would really have to happen quickly. So it is great if if operators, large fleet operators, can actually predict these things and start picking up vehicles, because there's going to be an absolute rush for these vehicles once these contracts are signed off, and then we would be going back to a glut.
Yeah. All right. And Mr. Malhotra, do you see this festive season? I'm not too sure because of you're already saying there are some challenges existing and there has to be some kind of a bumper, super kind of this thing for the festive season to do better. But do you at all see this festive season being the best ever?
So festival season clearly will be better than last year. And I think one of the key points is today all manufacturers, leave aside one or two models here and there, all models, all variants are available. That is, availability is excellent, which was not there last year. Plus the discounts and the schemes which have been rolled out in September and might be slightly upped in October. So customers are realizing they're getting great value. So that's something which is very, very positive. So October should be very good, but whether it be a bumper or super bumper, I don't assume. But the challenge, I think, arises from November onwards when the festival season closes off and you have December closing. But all in all, October should be good. Two-wheelers especially, and four-wheelers also. If the stock position has to be taken out, I expect very good sales in both two-wheelers and four-wheelers.
Right. Also, a few actually, a handful of new models are also in line to be launched in the beginning of October. So even though they might not be in the market as soon as we may expect, but they'll at least create the demand. So that will also help before the festive season. Mr. Shamsher, before we close in, what is your take on the full fiscal year FY25 for each of the segments?
Okay, so I think for the two-wheeler segment, we are looking at close to about 9 to 10% domestic volume growth. For passenger vehicle, I think that is somewhere it's a bit of a tricky situation. We had started the year by expecting about 3 to 5% growth, and as Mr. Malhotra said, it'll be a tall ask to kind of reach there by the end of this fiscal. Perhaps there is a downward bias to that number. And as far as commercial vehicles are concerned, medium and heavy commercial vehicle trucks will see a decline this year. Could be somewhere between 0 to -5% sort of a decline. But buses will continue to grow. So that's our expectation.
And on the electric front?
Well, electric, as you have to look at it from two-wheeler side and as well as from the passenger vehicle side. I think on the two-wheeler side, as I said, there has been a 27% growth based on the Vahan data. So I think the growth will continue to remain in strong double digits for the two-wheeler segment and the electric. But as Mr. Malhotra said, on the passenger vehicle side, there are certain issues. One, of course, is that after FAME 2 got over, which had some amount of subsidy element for the fleet segment, that is not there in PM E-Drive program. And to some extent, I think there is a little bit of a cannibalization also, which is happening from the strong hybrids in the market. CNG is growing quite well in the current year. I think last couple of months, CNG ratio is almost touching 16 to 17% of the industry, contribution. Plus, there is another element, I think some of the OEMs have deferred their EV launches in the passenger car segment. Which also, will require us to recalibrate our, penetration levels. So that's how it is, I think.
Got it. So I think that's all. That sums up the month of September, the quarter, and the first half of the fiscal as well. And we also got the expectations from the experts for the 6 months that are to come in. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining in, and thanks for your updates. Thank you.
Thank you so much.